Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be doing a URL shortener app. Let's let's edit that. See, shortener app. Maybe that's right. I don't know. Anyway, that's kind of funny. Um, and in this app, we're going to use Deno. Deno is a TypeScript, JavaScript runtime, server runtime that really focuses on web API standards for the browser and the JavaScript community. It's fairly new. It was created by the creator of Node, Ryan Dahl, um, and it has been around for about 3 years. And one of the nice things about it is it really reduces the complexity of your setup. You can do a lot with a lot less. It has a lot of things in the box, like dev tools, debugging, formatting, linting, type checking, testing, etc. And in this, we're going to kind of learn it by doing. So I'm going to go through the process of creating a little app. And the first thing we're going to do is start with creating a .emv file, which I've got here. And we're going to go into dashboard .hyper .io. Let's see here. Um, right here. We're going to go into that, and I'm going to go ahead and log out and then log back in. So if you're new to Hyper, you just go to dashboard.hyper.io and click the GitHub and walk through the sign up, which is not much, and then you'll be taken to an application dashboard screen like this. And in this application dashboard screen, we can click add new application, and we're just going to create an app called Go, and we just need data. So we'll create our Hyper app, and we'll go ahead and go to the dashboard and copy our connection string. It's building. So we'll just copy that and go back to our .env file and paste that in like that. Pretty cool. So we'll save that, and that will just be helpful when we want to save information later. And with this repo that is on GitHub, twilson63, go.hyper.io, we can go ahead and get started. So I've got an imports map JSON set up, and I've got a make file that does all the Deno run commands or Deno commands. So watch runs the server and in watch mode, so it'll restart every time I make a change. And then run will just run it with no restarts. Bundle will actually bundle it up so that I can distribute it. And then install will actually install all the dependencies. So that's all set up, and we're going to create a server right off the bat. So I'm going to go ahead and open mod ts, and we'll just import serve from server, and then we'll just call serve and add a handler and return a new response. Hello from Deno, like that. And the serve handler takes a request, so we could add a request. Since we're not using requests, we don't need that, but then it returns a response, and both the request and the response are just standard web APIs. And we can run this by running make, and if we check out our server, we can hopefully see hello from Deno. So that's just it. That's all you need to set up a web server is basically mod TS and an import JSON map and then a run command. And you're up and going. You've got a web server with a handler, which is cool. And to move things further, let's set up a GraphQL API. So I am learning GraphQL, so still learning that, but Deno and this library GQL makes it extremely easy to set up a GraphQL in Deno. Basically, this GraphQL HTTP file, oops, I don't know why I did that. Basically is a server handler. So it takes a request object and it returns a response. So what we'll do is go ahead and code that in the API.ts file. So let's go into, oops, get on the right tab, into api.ts, and we're going to import .env to load our environment variables, and then we're going to import GraphQL HTTP from GQL, and we're going to import make executable schema from GraphQL tools and import GQL's tag template from GraphQL tag, like that. And then we're going to go ahead and just bring in hyperconnect so that we can read and write data for our app. And we're going to go ahead and instantiate hyperconnect by just calling connect and then passing in the environment variable we set up called hyper, and we just need to say string. And now let's set up some type defs. So we'll do type defs equals GQL tag template, and we'll do a type for our shortcut, and that type will have a code as a string and an href as a string, right? Then we'll do another type called result, which when we create the resort shortcut, we want to return a result and just basically a Boolean that's okay, true, or false. And then we're going to create our query type, and the query type will have one query on it called shortcut, and it'll take code as an argument and be required and then return shortcut. And then we'll have a type of mutation, and we're going to create shortcut and take two arguments, a code as a string and an href as a string. And then we're going to return a result, and that's required. So those are our types. And now we need to do our resolvers. And I'm going to go ahead and we'll do the interfaces for the resolvers after we type those. So we got a query resolver, and it takes a shortcut, and parent is the first argument in a GraphQL resolver, and it's unknown because we're not using it. No need to define it. And then we'll get our args, and the argument for shortcut is code, and we'll just declare this input interface, and then we'll just implement this and call await hyper.data.getCode, and that's going to be a shortcut. So we need to declare both input and shortcut. So interface input, and it's going to be code as string, and interface shortcut, and that's going to be code as string and href as string. That, and this is resolvers, and then we've got one more for our mutation, and that's create shortcut. Parent is unknown, and in this the arguments are going to be code and href, and that's going to be type shortcut, and then we're going to return hyper.data.add, and we want to give our document an ID. That'll be code, and then code and href, like that, and we should be good there. Okay, so now we want to export our GraphQL handler. So we'll call it GraphQL, and we'll do a sync, and we'll bring in the request. It's being passed in, and we'll await GraphQL HTTP and provide a schema by making the executable schema, which requires resolvers and type defs. And we'll say that we want our graph IQL equal to true. And then so that provides a function, and we need to pass the request into that function, and that should return a response or a promise response. So I think we've got this set. Doesn't seem to be any errors, except for it can't find these dependencies because they're not loaded yet. So what we'll do to load those is go into our mod.ts file and import our API in. So we're going to import GraphQL from api.ts. And then instead of this text handler here, we're just going to put in GraphQL like that. And it's going to automatically pull down our dependencies, and it's up and running. So if we run now, we've got our GraphQL interface. Let's go ahead and create a shortcut. We've kind of got it all already teed up for us here, where we're sending a code hyper and an href hyper IO, and we're getting back a result. So let's go ahead and see how that works. Cool. Work with no problem. Let's do a query shortcut and provide a code as hyper, and hopefully we get an href, but we got to tell GraphQL that we need an href, right? And we do, and we get it. It's like that. Cool. So now we've got, with just a few lines of code, a fully functional GraphQL API. But we need to manage routes, right? So if we route to index, we don't want to serve our GraphQL API. If we route to the URL/code, we want to actually find the href and do a redirect. So let's set up some routing. And we can do that using the URL pattern web API. So let's set up a GraphQL route by saying new URL pattern, path name, GraphQL, And then we can set up index as new URL pattern, path name route. And then we can set up a go-to route, new URL pattern, path name code. We'll call that go-to. So those are our 3 routes. And what we'll do with our handler is we'll take the request, and let's go ahead and make this a sync because we're probably going to want to do an await in here. And we simply just test each route. So GQL test request.url. And if that's true, then we're going to return GraphQL request, right? Let's go ahead and return new response not found with a status of 404. Okay. And what am I doing wrong here? We'll check that out in a minute. And then we'll do index.test request.url. And maybe if I say it's a response, I'm about to specify that. Let's see, what is our problem? Sync has no await. Okay, I just haven't used the await yet. Let's go ahead and just get rid of the sync, and then I'll get rid of that. There we go. Cool. So with index, let's return new response. And let's add some HTML. Shorten our app H1. And we can just say headers, content type, application JSON, or actually, nope, this is text HTML. There we go. So that's our index. And then let's do go to test.url. And we'll return response.redirect HTTPS google.com. I'll just hard code this for now to test it out. And now that we've got that going, we've got our routes. Let's go ahead and pop over to our browser and refresh. And now we get URL shortener app. It's pretty cool. And if we go to GraphQL, we get our GraphQL. And if we go to any other route, blah, we should get redirected to Google because it's testing on that path name code. So that's pretty cool. We've got simple routing, didn't have to use a heavy framework. We just use URL pattern and basic Deno in the box functionality. Now, let's make this go to test work. And what we want to do is create in our API an export value that'll return the shortcut href. So we're going to go down here and create a new export statement. Export const shortcut. And it's going to be a sync, and it's going to take code as a string, and we're going to get the result of await hyper.data.get, which will be shortcut type code and shortcut, and then we're going to return result href if it exists. Cool. So we've got that. Let's import it in like that. And then in our check here with the goto test, we want to get the code. So we're going to call goto.execute request.url, and then get the path name dot groups dot code, which path name dot groups is where the arguments appear that are part of the path name. So this code object will appear in groups, and we'll get the code, and then we'll test if the code is valid, and then we'll return a response. And here we're gonna do await shortcut code, and that's where we need a sync up here. All right. So with that, I think we've got our little redirect working in our app. So let's give it a shot. Let's go to our URL, and if we do slash blah, we get an error, which is good. And if we go to hyper, bam, redirects to hyper. Pretty cool. We can go to GraphQL, right, and we can add another shortcut. So let's do create shortcut code meta href. I wonder if Facebook's going to change their URL to meta.com. That would be interesting, but it's facebook.com. Awesome. So we can create that. Oops. Got the set the result. Cool. And let's create another one. Let's do Twitter, twitter.com. Cool. And now if we go to our URL and do meta, takes us to Facebook. And if we do Twitter, takes us to Twitter. Pretty cool. So with that, we got our little app. What about deploying it? And with Deno, Deno.com has a globally distributed JavaScript platform. So located in 28 regions worldwide, and it's instant deployments, right? And you can see by the regions that they're, kind of using several cloud vendors to persist their data, which is pretty cool. So you can sign up with a GitHub account or sign in. And what we'll want to do is commit this code to our repo. Okay, now that we have that in our repository, hopefully. Sure. Okay, cool. Now we can just go over to Deno deploy, create a new project, create, and we're going to deploy with URL. We could deploy from GitHub by connecting to that, but it does take a bit of time to do that. So we're going to go to our GitHub repo and we're going to grab this. Oh, almost forgot. I need to bundle my code. Because Deno doesn't support import maps, I need to bundle the code. So I'm going to do make bundle, and that's going to create a bundle JS file, and it's going to take all my dependencies and bundle them up into a single file. And then I'm going to add bundle JS and push that to my repo. And then I'm going to go in and deploy via URL. And I'm going to grab that bundle JS file right here. And I'm going to select raw. So I'm going to grab this URL and go to deploy and paste that URL here. And hit deploy. And it's done. There's one thing that I need to set is my environment settings. So I'm going to go to settings, environment variables, and add hyper, go back to my dashboard, copy my connection string, and paste that in as the value, hit add. Cool. So now we've got that. And if we go to shorty2.deno.dev, we've got our app, and we can test it out by going to hyper. Cool. Go to meta. Sweet. And now if I try to go to GraphQL, because the bundle didn't include the graphical interface, I'm going to get an error. But GraphQL is still supported here. So I'm going to use a tool called Hopscotch. And I'll re-add these. So go to shorty2 deno.dev, and I'm going to add that to the URL with GraphQL. And then I'm going to do a post, and in my body, I'm going to query for hyper and get an href. So this is a GraphQL query as a JSON HTTP. Hit send, and I get back the data if I do meta, send, get back Facebook, and I can also do a mutation, right? So I can do mutation, create shortcut, and let's just do GitHub and href colon um, github.com/quotes and parentheses, and then OK. I think that's good. And yay, we created a shortcut. Can test it out. Go to GitHub. Sweet. It works. So that's the workshop. Um, Hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Deno is extremely cool. It's getting better and better every day. Um, I definitely advise you to check it out to do small scripts or play with small little servers and just check it out. I think it's going to be continue to get better over time. And we're really enjoying it. So thanks. Again, thanks, Tyler, for checking out the stream. Uh, Appreciate it. And you guys have a great weekend. Thanks.